Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for the thank you for joining us today for our Friday professional development webinar. I'm Jody Hammer, and I'm thrilled to be with you here today. And I'm even more excited to introduce to you our guest host for the day, who has a lot more experience than I do with data visualization, which is the topic for today. And I'm really looking forward to turning this over to my very special guest and then listening and learning along with the rest of you. So let me briefly introduce Angel Velarde is an RPCV from Cameroon and is a self-described quote unquote data nerd with over 10 years of specialized experience in data and operations analysis in the federal sector. So among his key skills is a proven track record of developing management tools and metrics to effectively measure performance and improve operations. So he's a dedicated manager and coach, and his central goal is to really motivate teams to provide excellent service by improving processes to run more efficiently and empowering staff to become more effective. And one of the things that he knows a lot about is data visualization. And he's going to talk today about, what it is, why it's important, and then most importantly, he's going to review several different tools and do a live demo. So we're really lucky to have Angel here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and take it away. Thank you so much. You can introduce yourself a little more fully. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Jody. And thanks for having me. That intro was basically my LinkedIn, so I hope that covered most of the professional stuff. Although my current day job is working as a data analyst and product owner at the Office of Personnel Management in the USA Staffing Office. I am actually currently deployed to the HHS, Health and Human Services, unaccompanied minors detail, which is where they just asked a bunch of people from the federal government to come and help with kind of this rush of unaccompanied minors coming across the border. And I'm currently the data and analytics lead for one of the facilities in the middle of West Texas, where we have about 1,000 unaccompanied minors that we are trying to place in the most appropriate place possible. So it's been a cool thing to be able to do. Long hours, 12-hour days every day, 7 days a week, but it's really rewarding. So a lot like Peace Corps, and a lot of the kind of work throughout has reminded me of the work of Peace Corps. So it's been really cool. But Jody, I mean, you mentioned I'm just a guest here and learning to see what you all do, and hopefully I can share some information about data visualization. Jody and I, and also Dan Baker, they roped me into this. We're fellow colleagues from our Corps headquarter days. But Jody has helped me so much on my own kind of learning how to talk about my own professional skill sets that I at least owed her this. And of course, Dan, I worked with Dan very closely in the Africa region and in Peace Corps headquarters, so had to do it for them.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to find me after this, you can feel free to find me on LinkedIn or email me at angelvelarde@live.com. So let's jump right into it. This idea that kind of Jody and Dan shared with me was to basically talk a little bit about how data visualization, what I've done in my past with it, what are some kind of tips and tools for being able to enhance your message, being able to take that data that you're looking for or the message that you're trying to share and enhance it by creating better visuals for it. That's all it is. And I hope that some of these tips that I'm going to share are helpful to you. Now, the tips, I'm just going to basically share 4 quick tips, a list of resources, and really most of the time I'm going to spend doing an actual demo, live demo of taking some data. We won't spend too much time in structuring it and analyzing it per se, but more about how to format it and structure it in a way that makes sense for visualization and then for presenting it. Because I think for the most part, when we talk about data visualization, we're talking about taking some kind of data, creating some kind of chart from it, and putting it into some kind of presentation material that we can share with others, right? So with that, let me go ahead and share 4 tips to great data viz, or at least 4 that I think are really crucial for how I think about data visualization. And by the way, at any point, feel free to add in the chat if you have any questions. Jody will alert me to them because I'm probably not going to see them. But Jody, yeah, please free to alert me if you see anything. So the first one, very obvious one, know your audience. So the reason this is important, it should be pretty obvious, is what you're trying to, the message that you're trying to share will obviously be impacted by who is listening to it. In fact, that's at least half of it. So I won't belabor this one just because it plays out through the rest of the other 3 tips. But knowing your audience, what they are expecting and what they are interested in is a crucial key of this. Second tip is have something useful to share. A friend of mine once told me that that just because someone is attending your webinar or presentation doesn't mean that they necessarily have to be interested in what you're saying. So it's your job as someone that's presenting to make the data that you're presenting interesting and something useful. So to make that useful, you obviously have to know your audience. So just make sure that just because you're sharing information about something that you think the audience might find interesting, it's still your job to make it interesting. And data viz can help with that. Third is to share it simply and intentionally. This just means that kind of the art and science of data visualization can be a creative endeavor for many of us. Myself as a data analyst, I love the process of creating with Excel or with Tableau or with R or whatever tool I'm using to create a data visual. But it can get a little, it can be easy to start going a little too far and making it a little more complex and getting a little too creative with it by adding things like what happened in the kind of early 2000s as people got more and more into Excel, and Excel provided more ways of formatting it. You started seeing some 3D charts and some shadows and just things that weren't crucial to the data you're showing. In recent times, I think that has kind of come down quite a bit, and people are using a lot more simple charts and graphs to describe data, which there's a science behind that, which is great. But then the second piece, to be intentional about it, is that every piece of information that you're putting on a slide or a presentation it's meant to be intentional, or it should be intentional, because you're telling something with it. And we'll talk about, and that's of course dependent on your audience, and we'll talk a little bit about that as kind of my way of thinking about it as I go a little farther into the demo. And then finally, it's always fun to, again, it's a kind of a creative endeavor. It's science and art to it. And it's fun to, as people are, especially if you're presenting on something that is kind of has already been covered quite a bit, like data visualization presentations, it's good to kind of have a twist to it, but don't go too far. There's a thin line or a fine line between surprising your audience and kind of adding a little bit of ooh or delight to it, and kind of confusing your audience and losing them. So, in that sense, it's good to kind of go over your presentations before you share it with anyone, and again, be creative but not too much, if you will. So with those 4 things, it's demo time. I just wanted to share kind of the list of resources that I will be using for the demo. Obviously, I imagine this will be available for you all after the presentation or after this webinar. And basically, these are all publicly available. They're free, and they're available to you to improve your data visualization.
Angel, we'll make sure that we try to even put this maybe in the description when we load it up to the YouTube channel, just so that it's very easy for folks to see the ones that you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, great idea. Thank you. So let's jump right into it. The idea for this demo today, and let me go ahead and close all of these for a second. The idea for the demo today is that we're going to take a data set and I'm going to pretend as if Jody had, instead of asking me to present on data visualization, she asked me to present on how to decide on which federal agency to work at. And as a data analyst, my thinking is, okay, what data is available for us to use that, to get that information? So in doing a quick search, the Office of Personnel Management, they do a federal employee viewpoint survey. So it's like the annual volunteer survey that we took as volunteers, right? But for federal staff. And they provide all that data back to the public so that we can look through it. So this is one source that you can use to make a data-driven decision on where you should work, where you would want to work as a federal staff, if that's something of interest to you. So on this website, I'm not actually going to go ahead and download it, but basically you select the year and you can select the file you're requesting. There's only one that will show up. I've already downloaded it and it's a pretty big file, so I won't bore you with the technical piece of just downloading something. I'm sure all of you know how to do that. And the data it's basically a large data set of survey information, and they share kind of a data dictionary as well of all of the data that's available. And here I'm just going to go ahead and filter it so we just see the questions. And these are all the questions that are asked in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. So what I've done is, and any of you can do this after this, of course. So I'm doing a demo of it, of what I would do. And of course, the questions that you might select may be different, but the way I was thinking about this in terms of how I would answer that hypothetical question is I would take a look at the questions in the survey and I would pick maybe 3 or 4 that I think are the most important things for me when I think about a place where I want to work. And from the questions in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, I liked these questions. So I feel encouraged to come up with new and better ways of doing things. Question 7, I know how my work relates to the agency's goals. Having worked at Peace Corps for quite a while with Jody and Dan and maybe even others here, I know that's something that there is something inherently just kind of positive about knowing that my work, it does relate to a goal that you believe in. Question 12, in my work unit, differences in performance are recognized in a meaningful way. Having worked in private sector, I think this applies a little bit less in public if you work in federal government. However, it is something that I think can be emphasized and enhanced, and I think it's a positive thing. So I wanted to find a federal agency where that is valued. And then finally, I have trust and confidence in my supervisor. Who you work for is a huge part of enjoying your work experience. So I would want to have a good supervisor, which I do now. Okay, so I chose those 4 questions. And so what I wanted to do is figure out, okay, well, so those are my questions. I know that it's a Likert scale, which is how they are ranking the data when they provide the answers to the survey. So it goes 1 through 5, 5 being good, 1 being bad, or that's a scale at least. And then the output of the data, how they're sharing the data back with you, are basically, they share the 1 to 5 of the particular respondents, and then you can use that, you can take the average of that to kind of rate or rank your top agencies, if you will. So I'm not going to go through that. This isn't a data analysis webinar, although happy to come back for that, because that's also really fun.
Be careful what you offer. Thanks, Angel.
Yeah. So I'll just show you kind of the output of kind of looking at the data, which is basically, I did a couple pivot tables on the raw data to kind of come up with the average for all of the agencies that are provided. And there's a bunch of kind kind of discussion in the code book about how the information is calculated and also which data is shared. So smaller agencies, like even Peace Corps would be considered a smaller agency or be considered as not having had enough respondents. They wouldn't show up as an individual agency. It's only agencies of a particular size or that had at least, I believe, 750 responses or more are going to show up here. So enough about the data stuff. I want to figure out how I can visualize this stuff, because looking at pivot tables and these numbers is not necessarily the best way to showcase this information, right? And share it to a wider audience. So that takes me to kind of our first tool that I wanted to share, which is let's see, go back to our thing here, which is the data visualization catalog, or datavizcatalog.com. So this is a good way to, if you know that you have some data you want to start visualizing, well, it's a way to kind of start thinking about how to visualize it. And when you think about visualization, it's similar, it's very analogous to analysis in that analysis is basically just answering who, what, when, where, how, and why. And in trying to answer those questions, you basically have options for how to visualize the data. And this kind of gives you a list, a very easy to follow list of how to visualize it. So are we comparing data? Is it proportional? Is it a relationship that we're looking for? Is there hierarchy? So just an example, relationships have to do with how does the state that I live in relate to how I answer, how satisfied I am in a particular question, for example. So any kind of correlation where you're comparing one to another and drawing some kind of relationship, figuring out what the relationship is, that's an example of what a relationship kind of visualization might be. In this case, we're comparing agencies. So I have a list of agencies with their average results for the survey, and I want to compare those results to see which are the best agencies to work at. So that's a comparison. So I'm going to click on that, and what's cool about this website is that it gives you a list of all the possible, not all the possible actually, there's always more, but many of the possible data visualizations that you can use. Now, one that is the most common, and it's most common for a reason, is bar chart. The reason bar chart is the most common is because it's easy, but it's also because it is, in general, our brains are already trained to easily interpret height as positive or negative, or higher or lower, and it's easy for us to just quickly interpret the data just by having it placed against each other and comparing the heights. So that is going to be the most common one and most popular one. Some other comparison tools are this box and whisker plot. So this one is really useful. If you do financial analysis, you will see things like this in kind of the financial, in the stock charts, where you see kind of this is the low and this is the high. If you flip it on its vertical axis, the low and the high, and then you'll have the average in the middle, and then you have a range, usually like 75% at the low end and 75% at the, 75% at the high end, 25% at the low end. Again, not a data analysis webinar, so we're not going to go into it, but we know that bar chart is going to be a good one to use. It's a safe one. You know that it's going to be valuable. Another one that is, it's a version of a bar chart, but it provides a little bit more context. It's a histogram. And this basically gives you the distribution. And we'll see how that differs from a bar chart. And I'll go ahead and show you why doing both of these is valuable. When it comes to data visualization, you can easily mislead the audience when you're doing your data visualization, as you know. It's called, statistics can basically say anything you want. So in being able to share accurate data, it's good to provide multiple views of the data. So bar chart, histogram are two that we'll explore. And then one more that's not listed here, surprisingly, is a heat map, or maybe there it is. There's a heat map. So a heat map is really interesting. We'll go ahead and click in that. And it basically gives you if you have kind of a list that's two-dimensional, in this case, they have towns and months across the bottom here. You can see what the hottest, this looks like the hottest months are for each of the towns and by each of the months. So this is a great way to see those relationships between two different categories and visualize it. So we're going to try a heat map as well, because it's actually really easy to do in Excel, a tool that most of you have, and it can be a way for analyzing the data and sharing it. So let's go ahead and jump into that piece then and look at the data. By the way, if there's any questions, feel free to stop me at any point.
Yeah, Angel, there's not really any questions so far, but I've encouraged folks to drop their questions into the chat box, and I'll certainly feed them to you. So thanks so much.
Great, thank you. So I've pulled out all of the data for all the agencies for the 4 questions that I thought were most interesting to me when deciding what federal agency I would want to work for. And you see, kind of highlighted the average there for all the federal agencies. Excuse me. And now I want to be able to do a quick heat map to see if that helps me describe the data. So a couple of ways to do this, and I'm going to shrink this a little bit. It may be harder to see, but the idea is more around what it looks like than having to see the specific numbers. So if you let's just go ahead and highlight one of the columns. And if you go to conditional formatting, if you go to color scales, there's a few different options for conditional formatting. In this case, we're going to use a color scale. And if you hover over each of them, you can see kind of the different options. For example, green being good, red being negative, possibly, and then the flip side of that. And then they have different versions of that. And you can kind of scroll through and kind of see which ones you think might be the most useful to you. In thinking about it, what I would want to do is I want to basically highlight the ones that are the highest, while de-emphasizing the ones that are lowest and I'm less interested in. In this case, it would typically be maybe a green to white one. And by the way, all these colors can be modified in Excel afterwards, which we will do. But even this green to white, I feel like it doesn't make the top stand out as much as it could relative to the white. So by maybe choosing the green to yellow, it makes the green pop out a little bit more. And we can talk a little bit more about contrast, but when it comes to like the color science of things, contrast is a good way of, again, getting one number to stand out above another.
Hey, Angel, real quick, a good suggestion came into the chat box. I had encouraged people to go up and, on the right hand corner of their screen, click on the view and then choose full screen. But if there's any way you can also do that, just so it's going to show that it just shows it much bigger than the side by side, that would be awesome. Then they should be able to. Yeah, on the top right of your Zoom where it says view, and you click on that and then it says choose full screen. And then that should make the page that you're on just as big without any of the gallery showing the pictures or anything.
I see what you're saying.
Yep. If you do that, it just might make it bigger for some folks that haven't done that on their end. So thanks.
Sure.
Awesome.
That being said, I do actually want to show the ribbon because it does contain some of the things.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely.
So in this case, so I said I was going to use yellow to green, or green to yellow. Mm-hmm. But a couple different things that you have to consider. So do we only want to highlight this one individually, or do we just go ahead and select all of them? After all, they're all generally about the same, right? And compare it kind of throughout for all of it. So if you do this one, you're also pulling in, you're kind of comparing question 2 to question 7 to question 12 to question 24. So in considering how to visualize the data, think about how you want your audience to think about the data. And in my case, I would really care more about having the audience focus on each question individually. So I'm going to just do each one of these, highlight them individually, and then do the conditional formatting individually. That way, the high numbers stand out for each question on its own. And I see that we're already halfway through, so I'm not gonna speed up, but I'm gonna try to focus on sharing the tools that are there, and if we need to go back and emphasize something else, we can.
Sure. Yep. Time flies, I tell you.
Yeah, tell you what. And I do want to leave some time for questions at the end,
Great.
because I'm happy to go into the analysis piece if you want to. So
that might be actually, I'm wondering if just because you have so much to cover still, that might be better to maybe cover it at a different time. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
whatever people want. Thanks.
Fair enough. So a few things. So once, so I was talking about keeping it simple. In looking at this heat map, what you want people to get out of it is basically being able to quickly, at a glance, see which are the agencies that are standing out in terms of having the most high responses or high values for each of the questions. So a couple of ways of doing that, I guess it goes more into the analysis piece, so I won't go too much into it, is by sorting it, and then one way I was going to do this, and we won't have time to go through all of it, is basically if you highlight each of these and you sort them each time, and then you just highlight the ones that are in the top 5 for each question, you'll have a list of all the ones that are in the top 5, and then you can kind of just filter it to look at those. And then when you create your presentation, you can just show the 8 or 9 top kind of top agencies that come out for you instead of having this full list, because whenever you have this full list, it would be hard to show it in a presentation like PowerPoint or something like that. And the other part about keeping it simple that I'll share and then I'll move on is that we want to emphasize, the idea is more to emphasize not the discrete measure like the 4.3 versus a 3.81. That's not necessarily what's important in this heat map. It's more about, is it at the top end of the values or lower end of the values? So we're going to de-emphasize the numbers themselves, because they're not what's important in this. It's more about where they rank in them. So I'm going to make it smaller. I'll also maybe make it slightly, instead of dark black, just go ahead and make it slightly lighter shade of black. And by the way, and I'm intentionally keeping these coded. I will do the grand reveal at the end if you want to know what based on these questions, what my best agency to work at would be. So that's a heat map. Again, from here, you can copy paste it into a presentation. We won't go into that piece of it. But because I do want to jump into a bar chart. And you can do a bar chart or it's just a vertical version of a bar chart. So in this case, though, because there are so many, I turned it vertical so that we could see more of it. However, depending on what you want to focus on, like I did here, I made it so that you could only see the top responses here. And I do want to talk about, let's talk a little bit about formatting, because this goes into the data visualization piece. Anyone can go into Excel, or most people can go into Excel and click on the insert recommended charts, and then pick a chart to visualize, right? That's the easy part. The thing that's going to differentiate your presentation from others and make it stand out is kind of using those tips and then applying them to your visualization. So there's a couple of things that in something like this are not as important. So whenever you see a bar chart, what you'll see is often just take the default that's already here, but they're not choosing to go ahead and de-emphasizing some of these values. So let's de-emphasize some of the things that are less important and emphasize some of the things that are more important. So it's already sorted so that the highest values are at the top, which is great. The other thing I would want to do is these bar charts are the actual important piece. That is the data. The space between them is not. So typically for a bar chart, what I like to do is if I just right clicked on it, on the bar chart itself, and went to format data series, and on the gap width, you can change that to something smaller. Between 20 and 50 is usually pretty good. And you see that now you have the data itself covering more of the information. Additionally, you want to emphasize what's important. So what's important is probably the top responses, right? So I'm going to de-emphasize all of it by clicking on the bars and then get out of the way. Here we go. And then going to choose shape fill, and I'm going to make them gray for now. And then I know that these top 5 are the ones that I'm most interested in. So I'm going to click it once and then click it again. And then that's going to go ahead and make it so that I have only one of the bars selected. And I'm just going to go ahead and color it something. I'm just going to do that for each of my top 5 so that we are focused on the top 5.
Angel, while you're doing that, can I ask a question from the audience?
Absolutely.
Let's see. Mariana asks, is each value, i.e. B3, C3, D3, an average? How did you find the value or weight the score?
Yeah, this is just an average of all of the Likert responses. So for example, people at this agency, there were maybe 500 responses ranging from 1 through 5, and this is the average result of that.
Gotcha.
So a couple things that are, okay, going back to it, again, it is important to see kind of the individual results here, I think. One, because sharing it via this particular bar, it doesn't give you quite enough context. Like these seem really close. So it'd be good to have the actual data. So again, for the top results, I'm going to go ahead and add the data label just for those, because those are the ones that I care most about. And since I've already labeled it with the actual number, I'm going to go ahead and take these grid lines. If you click on the grid line itself, and just take close at, right click them and then right click and then go to format axis. Oops, that's not it. It's the grid lines that I want. Format grid lines. You can, under color, you can go ahead and either take them off or make it something really light, which I like to do. That brings a little bit more attention to the actual data itself. A couple more things and we'll move on. Actually just one more, because we'll jump into a little bit more of this later on. Your axis, this top axis here, I actually often do like to leave it up top, but actually generally it's kind of better, or practice to just leave it at the bottom or delete it, especially once you have added this. However, the thing to look out for is that you see that the axis here does not go to 0, because if it did, this data would look a lot different. So just practice a little bit of, of caution when you are removing an axis. But this is extra data you don't need, that is more contextual now that we have these results, the actual data here. So I'm going to de-emphasize those by making them a little bit smaller, making the text a little bit lighter. Then these I'll make a little bit bigger because they're a little, well, can't make them bigger, because then they go away. So we'll keep those there for now. Okay, one more thing. In terms of this, whenever the default in Excel is for your chart to have a line around it or an outline. So I like to take that off, mostly because if you're going to move it to then stick it into a presentation, you generally don't want that separation between the charts and the information in in your PowerPoint or your presentation. So I'm going to take, actually first I'm going to take the outline off, and that'll look really nice once you stick it into a presentation, which we'll demo that piece now. I don't think we'll have a chance to or time to go into the histograms. It gets a little technical anyway, but just the idea is that you can create a histogram. I was going to go through revising one here so that it looks more like a histogram and it provides a little bit more value, but maybe for round 2.
Angel, what is a histogram really? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So a histogram just
I mean, not to go into it, but just what is it by definition?
Yeah, it just provides a distribution of all the responses. So this is how many people answered 5. This is how many people answered 4, et cetera. Yeah.
I gotcha. So it's nothing to do with history time, like time-wise. It's more, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I don't know why. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know why that's there. So let's say even if we just focus on these 2 data points, the heat map and the bar chart. The next step for most people in presenting this data, you're generally not going to send this a workbook to your boss or people you're presenting to and say, here you go, take a look at this. You'll stick it in some kind of way of presenting it. So the one that obviously people know and use and love or hate is PowerPoint. But there are some other options out there. I think you guys use something different, something too, I think. Jody, maybe not. Maybe you use the Google PowerPoint, but one that was shared with me when I was at Peace Corps that I think is really great and useful and there's a free version of it that provides a lot of value is Canva. If you haven't heard of Canva, it's basically a presentation. It can be a presentation tool, but it's so much more than that. And the great part about it is that they do a lot of the thinking about the formatting for you. So the idea is basically you go into Canva and you just select the template, and they have a lot of great templates already available for you. You can search for one. So see a job related, and they'll have some ideas for you to choose from. Now, again, it's art and science in terms of how to select a template that you think would work well with your data. But along with that, there is meaning to the charts that you produce or the presentations that you choose based on the colors, because colors do have meaning. And so there's many websites, but one example of a website, and I shared this in the links prior, changingminds.org has this cool and very simple kind of breakout of what the colors mean, which I think is really helpful as you start thinking about how to format your charts and what templates to use. So as an example, red is warmth, love, anger, danger. Yellow is attention grabbing, comfort, liveliness. Green, durability, reliability. Blue, peace, professionalism, loyalty, reliability. I think in this case, I mean, it has peace, the word peace in it, so we have to choose blue.
Right.
So we'll go ahead and choose blue as our kind of default template that we're looking for. And once I get this Zoom thing out of the way, go back. And actually, I'm not going to use Canva necessarily, because the most common one that you will end up using probably in your jobs are PowerPoint. So another resource.
Angel, can I just ask one question from the audience? Because Canva is something that we're hearing so much more about. I know, we are in NPCA as well, but someone from the audience says, what kinds of files are Canva presentations once you save them? Can you edit the file if someone else has sent it to you?
Yes. So you both need access to that. You both need a Canva account, but you can share access to the Canva between multiple people, which is really cool.
So similar to like Google Slides.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Except much more powerful, much more, the kind of templates that are available, et cetera, and things you can do. And then you can export them just like into PDFs or PowerPoints. So you really don't lose too much, other than there can be some formatting issues when exporting it, but for the most part, it's a great tool to use.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
And there's one other comment actually that I just wanted to share for you, Angel. As far as text colors being used, keep in mind, please keep in mind that some people are colorblind. And I guess the question would be, and you may not know this offhand, but what are the best colors to kind of keep yourself limited to if you are working with an audience that may include, there's certainly some people are colorblind. Are there certain
yeah,
colors that are better or worse?
yeah, there is a non-negligible number of colorblind people. So that is something to take into account. And actually I'll touch on that when I mention colors or coolers, if you will. It's another web page that I'll refer to in just a second. But first, I wanted to
Yeah.
share one more resource, which is slidecarnival.com.
Yep.
This is a great place for finding PowerPoint templates. And again, a lot of you are going to be using PowerPoint in your jobs. And this is a great way of making making your presentation stand out because it'll typically be different than other presentations. So I encourage you to look through Slide Carnival. I went ahead and found this blue one, which is pretty cool. But if you just go to Slide Carnival, there's a ton of different templates that you can choose from. But in this case, the other thing that's really cool about it is that it has already, much like Canva, it's already done a lot of the work in terms of helping you think about the elements of a presentation. And it formats it for you in that way where it has a kind of a template for an intro and a transition and the quotes and different aspects of a presentation, something with photos, even data pieces, a map. So all of their templates have that kind of layout, which is great because then you don't have to kind of recreate things. And when you download it, you can edit them as well.
Angel, that seems so simple, and that's great that they have the templates. And then, of course, there's the option then to customize if you wanted to create your own and be more whatever. Is that right?
That's
Great.
right.
Thanks.
So, for example, I'll just jump into one here now because this is and time has flown by. So I'm going to go ahead and just share a few different things here. So this is an example, again, what I would do if I was going to present on this topic in for this kind of webinar, right? I would grab that template. I would start editing it, and basically just start revising it. But then what's nice about it is, again, you can take your template and start revising it to kind of meet what you want. So you can, if you don't like these rockets are probably not necessary in my versions, I can go ahead and hide the background graphics, and then if you go to apply to all, it'll apply to all of the slides. You can also play with these gradients to make it kind of more of your own. You can change the color of the gradient if you want, but we wanted to stick with blue, so that's why I left it there. And then in terms of the last thing I'll share now is that in terms of creating your, copying your data into the PowerPoints, you typically, not always, but typically want to be consistent. So whenever you have, so if you choose kind of this two, what do you call it, two column layout, you usually want to have your text on one side and your data in the other every single time, unless there's a specific reason why you don't want to do that. But in general, it just makes it easier for the audience, for the readers to go through it. So just an example. Now get rid of that, and I'm going to go back to my Excel file. Oh, and one more thing I'll share about Excel, and I'm going to kind of transition back and forth here, but I'll try to go slow. So once you're done with your chart, just make sure that you're done. You can actually recreate it really easily with the template that you have with this formatting that you've already done by just copying and pasting it like the exact same chart. And then in Excel, you can just drag it to the next question, for example. And then it'll have the formatting in there for you again. And you'll just have to resort it, of course, which will mess up your other one, but that's okay. If we're pasting into PowerPoint and you paste it as an image, that's not going to be an issue. So the idea here is that we're going to paste this into the PowerPoint slide. And this is a little bit of trial and error. I'll kind of show you kind of what that process might look like. So if you paste it as just the Excel, or just Control V, it's going to do some funky stuff generally. So I typically don't want to do that. I typically just would want to kind of paste special and then select. Again, this is not always the case, but in most cases, you'll want to do a picture. And if you see here, it's white, which is fine, but excuse me, but maybe we don't want it to be white because it does seem like it's too obviously like cut out of somewhere and placed in here. We may want to do some formatting to it back in Excel before we paste it on here. So let me delete that now. And I think it'd be really great if this white didn't show up. It just became kind of the color of the presentation. So I'm going to go back to format and go to shape fill and take off the fill so that it'll be transparent when you paste it over. And additionally, I want to start thinking about the colors that I use for the presentation. I've already chosen this color to use. And what's cool about these slides is that they'll give you a bunch of resources and icons that you can use for your presentation down at the bottom. And then you can use kind of any of these slides to choose your own color palette. So the way you would do that, or one way to do it, is let's say we want to stick to this blue. You can go to your, let's see, you select really any element within there, and you go to this to any of these theme colors, and then go to eyedropper. You can select the color from this eyedropper, and it'll tell you the RGB if you hover over it. So I'm going to go ahead and just click it and go to more. After that's selected, go to more colors and go to custom. Usually it'll start in standard. Go to custom, and it's going to give you the RGB and the hex value for that. Using these values, now you can go to a website called Coolors. Or there's some other ones out there, of course. Adobe has a nice one. I like this one because it's really simple. And it actually has a bunch of different places that you can explore different values as well. But using this, you can go to this first one and then just put in the value that you got from that from the color that you received. So 91, 134, 199. 91, 134. So 91, 134. Oh, 134. That's 199. That's it. So you can set that, and then when you hover over it, you see that it'll have a lock, and it can be unlocked or locked. And then these other ones you'll want to keep unlocked. And then if you hit at the top, it says press the space bar to generate new color palettes. You can do that and just scroll through a palette that might be useful to you. And then it does have the option to select color blindness here. So if you think you have someone in your audience that might be colorblind, you can select this and it'll give you options around using colors that are not confusing to colorblind people.
So Angel, the importance or the relevance or why this is a great option is that you can then build different color, like you have the color palette, and then it will allow you to just easily pull that for future presentations if you have certain colors that are with your whatever theme or your organization, that kind of thing. Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Thanks for summarizing my long-windedness.
No, not at all. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding it. That's great.
Yeah, so if you want to use any of these other colors, and let's say we want to use this yellow one, or yellow one's a tricky one actually. So let's keep going and see what else they have. Let's use this darker brownish one. You can click on it and then it'll show you the RGB values, 71, 51, 53. So if I
Gotcha.
go back to it.
And so you could just insert those, like you could get it to show up basically in that color scheme instead.
Yeah. And,
Awesome.
and it's kind of a big file, so it's
Yep.
kind of freezing up on me here. But basically the idea is you can go ahead and there we go. Once it's back, you go ahead, shape fill, more fill colors, and then here, I think it was 71.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
53. Right.
And that seems really useful because oftentimes companies, I mean, I know in organizations like NPCA certainly has a certain color palette that, they want comms wants to be very, conscious of. And so this would make it easier for other people in our organization to make sure that presentations comply with their, preferences. So great.
Yep. Right.
Or brand.
So going back to this, if I were to paste it back here, again, doing paste special. It's not quite what we want, but you see kind of where we're headed, where we can play around with these, including these grid lines. We can get rid of them. We can de-emphasize these and keep playing around with it until you have the right kind of scheme to it. What we often see instead is, of course, just kind of copy and pasted whatever you get in Excel in this. And it just adds like a level of professionalism to take the extra time to play with the colors. And it's playing. It's kind of fun to play with the colors and play with the formatting to make it match have one cohesive kind of template available to you.
Angel, there's another question that came up, and I think it's a perfectly timed one, given we're looking at about, almost 5 till the hour. It goes fast, all of that. But will Angel be sharing or showing us free tools that we can learn to use to visualize live data on web pages?
So you can. So depending on what you have. So right now, again, this is more on the data analytics piece, which we can spend the whole webinar on that, of course.
Right.
But there are a few tools available, and the tricky part is that most of them are paid tools, unless you go full into Google. Like, for example, if you use Google Sheets, you can create a Google web page, so that Google has its own web page kind of maker that then you can add data to. And then if you have if that visualization is driven by Google Sheet, that is also being populated by like a survey, a Google, what's it called? It's not called Google Survey, it's Google something. Then all that stuff can become kind of cohesive and kind of real time, but it requires you to go full time and fully into Google. The other alternatives are something like Power BI and even Excel, like the Office 360 version, does allow you to do some of that although it's a little bit clunkier and not as good. And then Tableau has, you can embed certain Tableau things that you make on, especially if you have the server version. But if you're using the free version on their webpage, for example, you can link to things, but it won't let you embed them directly into your own page unless you have a paid account, I believe. So all that stuff gets a little bit trickier in terms of getting it on your web page, but it is doable, and it is a good conversation, good webinar to have.
Sure, that's a good one. And I tell you, we are having so many people in the comments indicating great information. This is so helpful. And they say, we'd love to have a follow-up. If you come back and do a follow-up, this is great. So we'll try to, twist your arm a little more and maybe have you back for a, back by popular demand type of session. So it's gone really fast. I know I want to respect your time, Angel. If you have something that's at the top of the hour, certainly, feel free to, we can wrap it up as you need. So
yeah, I probably do need to be going, but I really enjoyed this. I love talking about data, all types of data, and how to visualize it, how to analyze it. So who knows, maybe we can do this again sometime.
Angel, can I ask maybe two more questions before we get to, and we'll let you go then at the top of the hour. In terms of other, somebody shared in the chat box a really good tool. It sounds like it's another interesting source on this topic is the Economist's weekly newsletter, Off the Charts, which details all things data visualization, conundrums, and graphical representation. So great suggestion, Shaylin, if that's how you say your name, sorry.
Yep.
And then several had just said, this went so fast. Can we get Angel back? Right. If there's any other free resources you can think of off the top of your head for folks who want to like dig in. I mean, obviously this recording is great because people can go back to it and they can just play and pause and then do that step, play and pause and kind of go through on a slower pace where they are not limited by the hour and they can get a lot out of it. And I'm sure also by like doing a lot of Google searches, you get some really good free, short videos, things like that. But is there anything else on the top of your head that comes to mind for any of these that you've already talked about or the ones that you had wanted to get to?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. Something that for people that are interested in this topic and kind of writ large, there's something called, I think it's the Data Visualization Society. And it's actually one of my colleagues at my job is the current president. And it's a great way of, it's just people interested in this topic. You don't have to be like a full-time data analyst or work in data visualizing data. Can join it. It's free. There are tiers, paid versions, but it's free if you just want to join. And there's a ton of resources there, and a lot of they do a lot of webinars related to data visualization. So that's one place to start that can then take you to a bunch of different other places for information. I did want to end though with kind of the big reveal of which the best agencies to work with.
Yes, right? Do please.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and see this. So looking at the data that we had here, we did have, so the way you can go about it, and this again, more about data analysis and visualization, right, was that I could kind of highlight the top 5 for each of the questions. So this is not how the colors I would use, but just to be quick because we're out of time.
Sure.
Kind of my top 5 for each of these. Based on the 5 questions. So that's all of them here, the ones that are highlighted.
Yeah.
Now what's cool is that you can go in here and filter by color. So that's why if you want to filter just those top ones. And now you have just the top ones. And in looking at it, in terms of like the ones that have the most green, like the darkest green, and you could go ahead and go through here and do conditional formatting again to make it more kind of blatant. But just for lack of time, we won't. It looks like NN, NF, and maybe DR are kind of the top ones, top agencies for most satisfied on these 4 questions. So if we go to the code book for that and check out the agencies. So we said NN. So NN, that's NASA.
Okay.
See NF. NF, National Science Foundation. What's the other one that I like though? DR. DR seems to have a lot of dark greens. DR, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then I'll throw one more in there that I think was actually really high on this. I have trust and confidence in my supervisor that I think is really valuable. OM.
Yep.
That one is really key. And that one is, oh, look at that, Office of Personnel Management. So,
well, there you go. Isn't that?
I don't know how that happened, but
that's where you're working. That's great.
Yeah. So that's kind of how one way of going about it. And I just thought I'd finish out the conversation with what the data ends up actually saying. So that's all I have though.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. We so appreciate your being here. And as you're going to see yourself in the chat box, if you take a moment here, there's a lot of comments just saying, thank you so much. This was great, really helpful. Love to have more, all of those kinds of things. So Angel, thank you for taking time to be with us. I know how busy you are right now with, especially with your detail. That was the word I was thinking of earlier.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Oh,
come up with your detail.
my pleasure.
Doing such valuable work, and we just look forward to being in touch. And it's great that you gave your, contact information if people did want to get in touch with you individually. So appreciate that. Your spirit as an RPCV, a fellow RPCV, always wanting to help. So thanks for being here with us, and thanks audience for being here as well. And we hope to see you on future Friday professional development topics.